Welcome to ancient healthcare, where your doctor had no soap, your medicine came from a goat, and your mild fever killed half your village by lunchtime. Let's tour the diseases that didn't give warnings, they gave body counts. Ergotism in Neolithic Europe. You know what's worse than stale bread? Bread that kills you. Back in 4300 BCE, early European farmers stored their grains in damp pits. Great for mold, bad for humans. One mold in particular, Claviceps purpurea, loved to grow on rye and barley. When baked into bread, it didn't just make you hallucinate. It shut down your blood vessels, triggered seizures, and made your limbs rot off. Welcome to ergotism, or what medieval folks later called St. Anthony's fire. But here's the twist. These Neolithic deaths weren't just freak accidents. In Poland and France, archaeologists found bodies in mass graves with no trauma, no signs of violence, but sudden burial. Soil tests in those areas? Off the charts for ergot alkaloids. One study found fungal residues in ancient cereal stores, proof that people were basically eating their way into the afterlife. Symptoms came fast: burning skin, vomiting, convulsions, and hallucinations that made people think the devil himself had moved in. Some victims went into shock and died within 24 hours. Others slowly lost fingers and toes as their tissue blackened and died. Imagine getting gangrene from a sandwich. And no one had a clue. These were early agrarian societies. No doctors, no germ theory, just a growing suspicion that the food itself might be cursed. Which, in a way, it was. Some tribes even linked it to spirits or punishment from gods. And they weren't exactly wrong. Their gods just had spores. This wasn't a one-off incident either. Grain stores were a lifeline, but also a landmine. One bad harvest, and the whole village was tripping into seizures by spring. Modern science finally caught up in the 20th century when researchers connected ergot to LSD's chemical cousin. So yeah, Stone Age farmers were microdosing death. So next time you thank ancient civilizations for agriculture, maybe skip the rye. Neolithic Northern Europe. Before the Black Death, before Justinian, plague was already making house calls in Stone Age Europe, and it wasn't subtle. Around 3300 to 2900 BCE, something wiped out entire farming communities across Scandinavia, the Baltic, and Central Europe. Archaeologists originally blamed war or migration. But in 2021, scientists sequenced ancient teeth from Neolithic skeletons and found the oldest known strain of Yersinia pestis, the plague bacterium. Surprise! The Grim Reaper had a prehistoric travel itinerary. This early strain wasn't quite the bubonic nightmare it would become. It didn't ride fleas yet, but it still killed fast, likely through droplets, coughing, sneezing, close contact. And when it hit, people didn't get sick slowly. They dropped fast. Some graves show entire families buried at once. No signs of trauma, no signs of burial ritual. Just bodies stacked and forgotten. One grave in Sweden held a woman, child, and infant. DNA from the woman's teeth matched Y. pestis. They didn't die in battle. They died in days, maybe hours. Researchers think this outbreak played a major role in collapsing Europe's early megasettlements. These were large, dense communities of farmers, some over 10,000 people. Once the plague hit, populations plummeted. The survivors either fled or starved. Entire cultures blinked out, and nobody knew why. There were no symptoms recorded, no cure, no warning. One day you're trading barley and pottery, next day, your neighbor coughs and you both die before the goats finish bleeding. What's wild is this version of the plague was still in beta. It hadn't yet evolved the flea-to-human vector that would wreck medieval Europe. Even without its final form, it was still fast, lethal, and contagious. It took 5,000 years, multiple mutations, and a lot of rodents to turn into the Black Death. But this was the original version 1.0 of humanity's worst bacterial nightmare. And yes, it started before we even invented writing. So technically, we were dying of plague before we were dying of boredom in history class. Smallpox in ancient Egypt. If you've ever seen the mummy of Pharaoh Ramesses V, you've already met smallpox. His face, covered in pitted lesions. Not war wounds, not acne. That's smallpoxone of the oldest and deadliest viruses ever unleashed on humanity. For a long time, people thought smallpox showed up around the 1500s. Then came the CT scans, microscopes, and 21st century genome sequencing. Between 2020 and 2023, researchers traced smallpox's roots way further back. Turns out it's been around for at least 3,000 years. Right on cue, Ramesses V's mummy shows textbook pox scars, making him one of the earliest human receipts we've got. Modern Egyptian medical papyri, like the Ebers Papyrus, don't name smallpox directly, but they describe illnesses involving fever and pustules that match its symptoms. The disease's pattern of striking children and royalty alike disrupted inheritance lines and ritual calendars. Some scholars believe temples recorded abnormal death counts during certain years that may line up with viral surges. While no variola DNA has been extracted from Ramesses V himself, the visible scarring on his mummified skin remains one of the strongest visual clues in the ancient world. He wasn't just a casualty, but a case study sealed in linen. The disease moved fast. After a few days of fever, victims broke out in a blistering rash that covered their whole body, inside and out. If you were lucky, you died from organ failure or infection within a week. If you weren't, you lived, scarred, blinded, and immune, which is the ancient version of, "Congratulations, you survived." Egypt was the perfect incubator. Hot climate, crowded cities, armies marching across borders, trade ships floating down the Nile, all ideal for viral hitchhikers. Once smallpox arrived, it didn't just stick around, it thrived. Priests blamed angry gods. Physicians bled people or smeared them with goose fat. Nothing worked. The rich died slower, the poor died faster. And Ramesses? His mummy suggests he didn't go quietly. His pox lesions were so severe, he may have died mid-outbreak. Historians now believe smallpox helped shape dynasties. Kill enough nobles and power shifts, interrupt enough harvests, and famine follows. It wasn't just a health crisis, it was political. Modern analysis even suggests smallpox may have existed even earlier, possibly around 1600 BCE in India or China. But Egypt gave us our first visual proof. A dead king, preserved for millennia, still showing the battle wounds. Smallpox didn't just change history, it mummified it. The Plague of Athens. Democracy was dying, literally. In 430 BCE, Athens was stuffed wall to wall with citizens hiding from Spartan attacks. One tiny problem: no sewers, no hygiene, no personal space. When a mystery disease slipped in from the port of Piraeus, it didn't knock. It kicked the door off its hinges and burned the house down. According to Thucydides, the Athenian historian who caught it and lived, the plague killed up to 100,000 people in just 4 years. Victims burned with fever, bled from the eyes, erupted in ulcers, and died within a week. Some collapsed mid-sentence, others stripped naked, ran screaming into fountains, and drowned. It was madness wrapped in pus. No one knew what it was. Theories flew: typhus, measles, bubonic plague, even Ebola. Anachronistic, but sure. Then in 2006, Greek scientists analyzed dental pulp from a mass grave near Kerameikos. The lab results? Salmonella enterica serovar typhi, aka typhoid fever. Not the flashiest name, but it gets the job done. This wasn't just a public health disaster. It was a strategic implosion. Athens, cultural capital of the Mediterranean, lost generals, farmers, orators, and soldiers. Pericles, the leader of the Athenian Golden Age, died during the outbreak, after catching it twice. The war effort sputtered. Morale bottomed out. Doctors had no clue. They reused cloths, treated fevers with wine and hope, and died trying to help. Contagion theory didn't exist yet. Medicine was more pray and bleed than isolate and recover. And the survivors? They weren't always lucky. Some got it twice. Some lived, but lost fingers, sight, or sanity. Others suffered seizures and became walking cautionary tales. By 426 BCE, when the worst had passed, Athens looked nothing like the marble democracy it sold to the world. Sparta didn't need to storm the gates. The germs broke in first and did all the heavy lifting. Next time someone says civilization peaked with the Greeks, feel free to agree. Then remind them that it also vomited, raved, bled, and dropped dead in the streets while arguing about philosophy. Dysentery after Cannae. The Battle of Cannae was already a bloodbath, but Rome's worst day got even worse, in the latrines. After Hannibal's army wiped out over 50,000 Roman soldiers in a single afternoon, using brilliant tactics and a lot of angry elephants, thousands of survivors fled. Many hid in swamps, ravines, and anything far enough from the battlefield to stop the bleeding. Unfortunately, that's where the real killer waited. Not a sword, not a spear, bacteria. Enter dysentery. Likely caused by Shigella or Entamoeba histolytica, both happy to spread in water contaminated with human waste. Which is exactly what you get when 80,000 men flee into marshes with no toilets and drink from the same streams they're squatting near. That's not a metaphor, that's Roman military planning. Symptoms came on fast: severe stomach cramps, fever, nausea, and relentless diarrhea that drained the body dry. Soldiers who survived Hannibal's cavalry collapsed in their own filth a day later. Some accounts claim more died after the battle than during it. You don't need an ambush when dehydration can kill in 48 hours. Polybius didn't call it dysentery. He just said the bodies swelled with decay. Modern medicine filled in the rest. Fast-acting, waterborne, highly infectious. That's classic amoebic dysentery, straight from the textbook of things you don't want to catch in a swamp. Doctors at the time were useless. Roman battlefield medicine included wine rinses, ash poultices, and lizard blood. They didn't believe in bacteria. They believed in imbalanced humors. Guess what didn't fix explosive diarrhea? Balancing your humors. And here's the kicker. Hannibal's troops got it too. His men were also stuck in contaminated fields, and despite winning the battle, his army slowly rotted along the same path. Victory looked good on paper. In reality, both sides were being picked off by invisible parasites. All because no one thought to boil the water. Cannae didn't just become a military textbook case, it became a lesson in battlefield hygiene. Too bad the Romans didn't take notes fast enough. They kept losing men to dysentery for centuries. So next time someone talks about the genius of Hannibal or the might of Rome, just remember, what really ended the day wasn't strategy or steel. It was diarrhea, lots of it. And fast. Leptospirosis in Han China. In the Han Dynasty, people feared a fever that came fast, burned hot, and ended badly. They called it rat sickness. And honestly, that's about as accurate as ancient medicine ever got. Modern researchers believe this was leptospirosis, a bacterial infection spread through rat urine in drinking water, crops, or open wounds. The bacteria, Leptospira interrogans, swim like a corkscrew through your bloodstream. Victims looked fine one day, then collapsed the next. Fever, jaundice, muscle breakdown, then kidneys stopped working. Game over. Historical texts describe sudden, widespread deaths in flood-prone areas. Farmers, soldiers, laborers, anyone working barefoot in rice paddies or trenches. The Han court even restricted water use during outbreaks, though they had no clue what they were stopping. Leptospirosis moves fast. It can kill in under 48 hours. No visible injuries, no obvious source. Just organ failure, confusion, and internal bleeding that made people think spirits had sucked out the life. And yeah, this was a water empire. The Grand Canal, river systems, irrigation, great for trade, also great for rat pee. In 2023, researchers studied ancient burials in eastern China. They noticed death spikes after seasonal floods. The timing lined up with modern leptospirosis outbreaks. Same regions, same patterns, just separated by 2,000 years and a lot of rats. There's no dramatic mummy here, no battlefield, no burning city, just quiet collapse. People went to sleep feeling sore and woke up drowning in their own fluids. Treatment back then? Herbal tea and prayers. Neither worked. This wasn't a one-time thing either. It likely reappeared every few years, killing fast, disappearing just as quickly. That's what makes it hard to trace. Leptospirosis doesn't stick around. It just shows up, empties a few villages, then vanishes into the paddies again. Now, if you ever feel bad for the guy hauling buckets through monsoon season in ancient China, remember, he probably wasn't killed by war or famine. He just stepped in something. Flesh-eating curse in Roman legions. Roman soldiers feared more than arrows. They feared what happened after the battle, when a tiny cut could turn into a death sentence overnight. Welcome to necrotizing fasciitis, aka flesh-eating bacteria. In the 1st century CE, Roman medics didn't know what caused it, but they knew the signs. A wound that turned black, swelled like a wineskin, and reeked worse than a latrine? Yeah, that guy wasn't marching tomorrow. Medical texts by Galen and Celsus describe putrid flesh and rapid decay that spread beyond the injury. They tried everything: wine, hot oil, even cutting away muscle. Nothing stopped the spread. Some soldiers begged for amputation. Others died before anyone grabbed a knife. Modern historians believe this was Group A, Streptococcus, or Clostridium perfringens. It entered through minor wounds, especially in dirty camps. Once inside, it released toxins that liquefied flesh. You didn't just get infected, you dissolved from the inside out. Death could come in 12 to 24 hours. And the Roman battlefield was the perfect incubator. Blood, dirt, metal. No antibiotics, no sterilization, just herbs and hope. Field surgeons operated with bronze tools and bare hands, spreading the bacteria like a buffet line. Some medics even called it a curse from Mars, the god of war punishing weak men. Real cause? Rotten bandages, contaminated water, and the bacteria playing speedrun through human muscle. One account from Celsus tells of a soldier whose leg turned black by nightfall and killed him before sunrise. They burned the body to stop the poison, which was somehow the smartest thing they did. Today, necrotizing fasciitis kills 1 in 3 even with modern care. Back then, if you got it, you were dead. Fast. So, sure, Roman soldiers were tough, but no amount of bravery saved you from bacteria that didn't even need a sword to end your campaign. Anthrax in Mesopotamia. In ancient Mesopotamia, the gods weren't the only things farmers feared. There was something far more immediate and a lot less divine lurking in their pastures: anthrax. Clay tablets from the time mention sudden outbreaks that killed both animals and their handlers within hours. Victims broke out in black sores, gasped for breath, and died foaming at the mouth. Not demons. Not curses. Just Bacillus anthracis spores doing their thing. Anthrax is a bacterial killer that spreads through contact with infected meat, soil, or air. And once those spores hit your lungs or bloodstream, you're on a timer. Inhalational anthrax can kill in under 24 hours. Cutaneous cases, spread through handling contaminated hides, gave people black, crusty lesions. Ancient Sumerians even called it the black sore death. Mesopotamian texts don't use the word anthrax, obviously, but they describe symptoms that line up eerily well with modern clinical cases. Modern studies show anthrax spores can survive in soil for centuries. One 2020 report even found live spores in old livestock pits. The ancient symptoms? They line up a little too well. The spores can survive in soil for decades. Farmers unknowingly plowed up old killing fields every planting season. One scratch on the hand, one breath during a dust storm, and that was it. Game over. And remember, this was a society built on livestock. Sheep, goats, oxen, and every home had animals. Every animal had blood, and every blood spill was a potential outbreak. Treatment? None. Recognition? Zero. The only strategy was to burn the bodies, avoid the field, and pray the gods didn't strike twice. Today, anthrax is a biohazard. Back then, it was just a really bad Tuesday. One day you're tanning a cowhide. Next day, your skin's turning black and your lungs are shutting down. They called it divine punishment. We call it a bacterial time bomb. Tuberculosis in ancient India. In the 6th century India, people whispered about a sickness that stole your breath and hollowed you out. It didn't slash or burn. It just stayed quiet, invisible, and drained you until your ribs showed and your voice gave out. They called it the white cough. We call it tuberculosis. But this wasn't the slow, wasting kind we think of today. Some cases were lightning fast. A modern form called miliary TB spreads through the bloodstream and fills the lungs like a fine mist. You don't cough for weeks, you drop in days. Think headache, high fever, shortness of breath, then dead before the village priest can finish lighting the incense. Ancient Ayurvedic texts like the Karaka Samhita describe sudden cough, fever, wasting, and death. Victims were isolated, not because they understood germs, but because nobody wanted to join them in the grave. Which, fair. Modern paleopathologists have confirmed tubercular lesions in ancient Indian skeletons, especially along the spine. Biomolecular evidence confirms that TB has been around since Neolithic times, way back in prehistory. That means TB wasn't just present, it was raging, and it spread like wildfire. India's growing cities, trade routes, and temples brought people close. One breath in a crowded market was all it took. No antibiotics, no masks, just your immune system versus an airborne assassin. Priests tried herbs, chanting, and purification rituals. None of it worked. And the worst part? The disease didn't always look dangerous. Some people walked around infectious for weeks, coughing quietly. Others just keeled over after 3 days. Miliary TB made ancient people think they were cursed, sickened by ghosts, karma, or impure thoughts. But the truth was much smaller. Just a microbe. Just air. Justinianic plague. In 541 CE, something ugly rolled in from Egypt. Not an army, not a storm. A bacterium, Yersinia pestis, freshly mutated, riding fleas, hiding in rats, and about to wipe out a chunk of the known world. Welcome to the Justinianic plague, the first recorded pandemic to go truly global. It hit Constantinople in 542, just as Emperor Justinian was trying to rebuild the Roman Empire. Instead, he got mass death. According to Procopius, the city lost 5,000 to 10,000 people a day. Bodies piled in towers. Some were dumped into the sea. Gravediggers gave up. Survivors lit incense, not for worship, but to mask the smell. Symptoms were brutal and fast. High fever, vomiting, delirium, and black buboes the size of eggs. Victims could die within 24 to 48 hours. If you made it past day 3, you were a medical miracle. Even Justinian himself caught it. He lived, barely. Most didn't. By the end of the first wave, historians estimate 25 to 50 million people died across the empire. That's up to half the population from North Africa to the Balkans. Trade collapsed, food ran out. Armies disbanded, cities emptied, people abandoned the sick, then died in the same alley. This wasn't the Black Death yet, but it was the beta version. In 2013, researchers sequenced plague DNA from 6th century German graves. Same bacteria, different strain. A 2022 study confirmed it came from Central Asia, spreading west on trade routes long before anyone knew germs existed. The plague returned in waves for the next 200 years, hitting every generation. It didn't just kill people, but kneecapped an empire. Justinian's dream of uniting Rome fizzled under piles of bloated corpses. One bishop wrote, "The world is dying." He was wrong. The world didn't die. It just smelled like it did.